Hello and welcome. We are at Volvo Ocean Race headquarters in Alicante. We are going to be unpacking everything that has been happening in an incredibly challenging 24 hours for the teams. Some winners, some losers, and some surprises as well. And to help us with all of that, we've got Roscoe Monson from Team Axel Nobel. He was with us yesterday. You liked him. We brought him back, but he's only here for today. So if you've got any burning questions about navigation, Team Axel Nobel, or indeed the race in general, put them in the comments. We will be coming to that at the end of the show. We're also going to be hearing from the teams. We're going to be hearing from Dongfeng Race Team. We're going to be hearing from Team Axel Nobel themselves. It's incredibly interesting what's been happening on the race right now, and they're not out of the doldrums just yet. Don't take my word for it. Let's take a look at the tracker and see how leg 4 is being played out right now. We are into an incredibly interesting leg. Melbourne to Hong Kong. The white line there showing the most direct route, but look what is happening. It's all about getting north. That's where the new breeze is going to be. And where we left it yesterday, it looked pretty much cut and dry. Vestas 11th Hour Racing, Team Axel Nobel and Dongfeng Race Team just charging out that way. Since then, bit of an opening up has happened, and Team Brunel has put on an incredibly strong charge. Roscoe, just talk us through how they did this and what really happened out there.
Well, you can see in front on the left-hand side of the screen, Map Free dropped into a hole, unfortunately. They're very focused on the boats in the east right now, and Brunel, probably seeing what was happening up in front, have been able to make that move over to the east. You can also see Dongfeng on the right-hand side of the screen have made a move to the east of the respective boats next to them, just trying to get leverage on the boats around them to make the gains in the next part of the race.
It seems like one of these legs right now that you just can't switch off from the tracker. Team Brunel turned the tide on plastic a long way back, now really moving their way up. But we do have many miles left to go. The trade winds are lying in wait, however, and once the teams reach that steady breeze, we're going to see some very fast reaching indeed, and the miles will come ticking down very quickly all the way to the finish line in Hong Kong. So that's the current positions. We're going to be hearing from Chris Nicholson in just a moment, but before we do, a quick reminder of the competition. Here in the studio, I can show you we have some fantastic Musto gear here. Vestas 11th Hour Racing gear. All we ask from you to win all this is at what point, at what date, and at what time is Vestas 11th Hour Racing going to reach within 2,000 nautical miles to the finish. It is going to be coming up fairly soon, and the competition will be closing at midnight on Friday. And don't wait for the last moment to get your answer in, because it will be the first correct answer that wins. Put them in the comments on this show. Let us know what you think, and we will see what we've got as an answer. Now then, Chris Nicholson on board Team Axel Nobel. They've had a fantastic 24 hours, and I caught up with him to give him a well-earned pat on the back.
Up until an hour ago, we thought it had been a very, very bad 24 hours because we lost touch with Vestas and even Dongfeng to a certain extent. And now they're about 5 miles apart in front of us, and we've ended up having a stronger day than Map Free, Brunel, Scalewag and Turn the Tide. So yes, it ended up better than we thought it was going to.
And from, now that you're back in touch, or at least you've got your position report, is there any movement in the fleet which has surprised you?
Well, like we went into a rain squall this morning, almost a mile with Vestas, and we lost 7 miles out of that, so that was a bit of a surprise on the bad side. And I guess everyone at home is seeing, I guess Scalewag almost in the lead, but certainly from our point of view, we've been racing north, and certainly all the boats around us have been racing north all the time. So I'm kind of looking up the track here now in the night time. I can see Vestas, and I'm kind of considering them at the moment as the lead boat. Dongfeng on our hip, and we're neck and neck with them. So, from what was a really difficult 24 hours for everyone in the fleet, we're kind of glad to still be in touch with in the position that we want to be.
Everybody, race expert-wise, has been talking about the north and the east being the two powerful positions. Do you feel a little bit boxed in by Dongfeng Race Team and Vestas 11th Hour Racing?
No, to be honest, it's not bad company to be with. You kind of, even though sometimes you're not 100% sure of the directions and the tactics that we're employing, there is some comfort that there's other good guys employing the same. So I want to have another go at them in some rain squalls. I wasn't happy with coming out on the losing side of one this morning. I want to make sure that the last time, the last squalls before we get into the northeast trades, that we're in a good position to hopefully capitalise on that.
When do you think that moment's going to be? Because this relentless gear changing and constant squall dodging, it's got to come to an end at some point.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I don't know. We'll just keep doing it until it does. Mate, I'm very sorry. I do have to go. We've got a rain squall on the way. We have to take.
Well, obviously, sometimes when you dial into these boats, a lot's going on. I'm guessing from your point of view, attack last minute. Chris Nicholson just putting down the phone. Good to hear they're still working hard.
Yeah, I mean, the guys are pushing so hard right now. Every cloud, every little move, they know they've got to, like Chris said, stay in front with Festus and these guys, not letting them get the jump on them.
Well, the good news is that actually the onboard reporter, Sam Greenfield, did pick up the phone and continue that call. We're going to bring you that in just a moment, but let's hear from another boat now. Dongfeng race team, also in a similar patch of water and also with hopes of taking the lead. We caught up with Carolyn Brower to hear just how it's going.
The conditions have been really, really tricky, and the wind picked up from about 4 knots to 10 knots, 11 knots, and that's when we start shifting weight, because in 4 knots we've got all the weight forward on the bow, all the sails. And basically we need all hands on deck to start bringing the sails further back. And that's what we've just done. And just as we finished doing that, the wind dropped back to 4 knots again. So off we went, back forward with the sails again. So it's a bit of a dance back and forwards with the sails and the stacking down below.
So I'm guessing these constant gear changes are typical of the last 24, 48 hours.
They're there constantly, actually. We've now, this is now our 5th day in the doldrums. We hope to get out of here one day. So and in the doldrums, you float around for hours, waiting for a little puff to hit you. And sometimes, you're sailing along in some decent conditions, and the next moment you've got this big rain cloud, this big squall that hits you. So, there's never a dull moment here, and you just try and tackle the conditions that get thrown at you the best you can. We're just trying to gain that every little meter that we can in these difficult conditions.
Well, speaking of the race at the moment, what's your take on your position versus the fleet?
In our last sked, it didn't look too good for Dongfeng. For us, Scallywag's actually leading, and we are in last place. But from where we are and what we see on the screen and what we expect the weather to do, that's not entirely how we see it. We've been aiming for the last couple of days to just be as north as possible. We are aiming for the northeasterly trade winds, and so basically the first boat to get into those, to hook into those, and then it's just a question of the rich get richer, and that's been our objective over the last couple of days, to just aim sort of north, and we're happy to be sort of the most east boat, and that's why in the sked we come out last, but we are just aiming for the next window where we want to hook into northeasterly trade winds.
And when is that moment going to come? Will we start to see Dongfeng race team making the moves more westerly?
Well, when these when we finally get out of the doldrums, and when we hook into this new northeasterly trade winds, and hopefully that'll happen in the next 24 hours.
Okay, well, Carolyn, thank you so much for taking the time. I'll let you get back to stacking.
Okay, thank you very much.
So far, so good for Dongfeng race team. Meanwhile, Team AkzoNobel going through that tack and trying to deal with that incoming squall. Now, Chris Nicholson, we were talking to him earlier, but he had to get called up on deck to deal with the changing of conditions. But the onboard reporter, Sam Greenfield, picked up the headset and filled us in as to what was happening through that moment.
It is a pitch black night. We've got no moon up right now, and basically this time of day, all the clouds start getting really active. So there is this giant Death Star of a cloud that is just moving over the boat. I look right over the bow right now, and the entire bottom of it is just pitch black. It goes up a couple thousand feet, and we just got this massive header. So basically, the guys are all on the handles right now. They're following up the masthead 0, and we're going to tack over onto the other board to try and get on the right side of it. Because as I'm sure he was explaining to you, these can go either really well or really bad, and right now we're on the bad side of it.
How punishing are these doldrums for the teams right now? You've been keeping an eye on all these sailors.
Yeah, well, we thought we were out of it yesterday, and Jules said, well, hold on a sec, we actually have another cloud line. So this has been our third run-in with the doldrums on this leg, and I guess it's just payback for leg 2 when there really was nothing. But yeah, they're brutal. We spent, in the last iteration of it, 2 days drifting, absolutely glass ocean. You could see the reflection on the clouds from miles away, and this isn't as painful, but at this point, we're a couple days into it. Everyone's just ready to punch out and get into the trade. So, I think it's starting to test everybody's patience. But the other side of it, guys like Chris and probably all these guys, and girls, they really enjoy it. So it's just another part of the game for them. It's like a chessboard. Everybody was just, when they looked at the last sked, a huge sigh of relief. I mean, like from Simeon and Jules at least, just to see that we hadn't been shot out the back.
There you go, never a dull moment for any of the sailors. Team Axonabel having to break off that call with us mid-live X, but as you were saying before, it's pretty happy for you, I'm sure, being on shore, seeing how hard they are pushing for every single one of those opportunities for a single boat length.
It means a lot to us. It means a lot to Team AxoNoble. We know what we've got to do now. We're running out of planet to get results, so everyone's pushing really hard, yeah.
Okay, well, you've been sending in your questions. You've still got a little bit of time if you want to. We've got Roscoe Monson here. This is the onshore navigator and the navigator from leg 1 for Team AxoNoble, the performance analyst. If you want to know anything about the Volvo 65s, Team AxoNoble, the race in general, how it is going to be won and lost, put your questions in the comments. So let's start with a couple here. We've had a question from Christopher Brammer, who asked, how are the teams doing with their food supplies? Did they anticipate such a long doldrums leg? Just talk us through how you guys prepared and what the teams have done.
Obviously, the teams plan each leg by leg. One of the features of this race, of this last 2 legs, was that in Melbourne, due to Australian customs and immigration regulations, we weren't allowed to take food off or on board the boat during the Melbourne stopover. So the guys have been carrying all the food since Cape Town. So it was well planned in advance. It was thought about. We were also able to save some food from the last leg, the Southern Ocean leg, that the guys didn't eat, and they've got that for the doldrums now. So there's plenty of food on board.
Okay, sticking with food then, because we've had another question about this as well from Derek Lane, who asked, in Hong Kong or any other stopover, is there a weight restriction on the amount of food, water or gear that a crew can take on board? Is this up to the skipper, risk versus reward? How does it break down?
There is risk versus reward. There's backup water that the guys have to carry on board and some minimum spares supplies that are in the life rafts. But in terms of the food, one of the things we found with the boats and performance-wise, you're allowed to stack the food. So it's a weight that you can stack. And these Volvo 65s like weight stacked. So generally the guys haven't been afraid to take a little bit more food generally, which makes life better for them on board as well.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure. Although one thing that we have seen from all the footage that are coming off, and in fact some of the images that we can see right now, not exactly appetizing.
It's not appetizing. It's definitely an acquired taste, and and you've got to be very careful how you prepare it. Otherwise, certainly in the doldrums, the food can actually dehydrate you as well. So the guys are definitely letting the freeze-dried soak for a lot longer. Okay, right, moving on. We've had a question here from James Clapham. I'll just answer this one very quickly because we get this one a lot and I understand why. All the boats have drones. Can they be used to look for wind? The answer is no. The OBRs have the drones and that's for media, and the OBRs, the onboard reporter, is not allowed to contribute to the performance of the boat in any way. So it is purely there for us and your benefit at home, but not for the sailors. Okay, another question here from Mariana Glicic, I think. I apologise for butchering the pronunciation of your name. A question for Ross. We have seen a lot of lightning around the boats when a storm comes. How do the boats and the sailors protect themselves from being hit by lightning? Obviously, in these Volvo 65s, full of technology, full of computers, it is a problem, it is a worry. There are certain things on board you can do. They don't tend to turn the instruments off, but they've got two wands, and they can also turn they can switch the wands if they want to and disconnect the upper wand going through light.
So wand-wise, is the instrumentation at the top of the mast?
Yeah, they've got two wands, one that sits above the rig and one that sits out the front. So one of the things we can do, and we advise the navigators to do, is to switch the wands to the forward wand, and that means the highest point basically is the VHF antenna, not the instrument system. And obviously the guys are trying to avoid lightning where they can.
Have you ever been on a boat and had it struck by lightning?
We certainly saw Ericsson in 2006 had a massive lightning strike off Brazil. We heard that Brunel potentially was in a lightning strike not so long ago. So I've been on other yachts in other parts of the world have had massive strikes. So yes, it is a massive problem and something the guys are trying to avoid.
Oh, you did mention Team Brunel. If you haven't seen the footage yourself, I advise you to go back on the raw feed or through any of the social media channels. The shot of Rome Kirby going into the fetal position and abandoning the helm and going into the middle of the boat when the lightning strike happened is quite funny. I advise you to take a little bit of a look at that one. Okay, so another question here from Vikram Ram, just talking about navigation. Considering some teams discuss the navigation options before finally coming to a consensus, I wonder if there are any disputes during such a session, and if so, how intense are the disputes?
I mean, these are professional sailors. They're very professional about how they approach the decisions. I think I'd like to say that everyone, that's part of the decision making and the brains trust. That's why the brains trust is there. Everyone can have an input, but people have to realize that if they don't have all the information or the right information, you're not always going to come up with the right decision. And like we've seen, sometimes you make the right decision, sometimes you make the wrong decision. At some point in this race, everyone's going to face that and have to deal with it. And
it certainly is a position on the boat, the navigator's position, that in this edition, as you were saying yesterday, I mean, is under relentless pressure.
Every day. We've seen numerous decision-making going on in the last 48 hours just to get through this light spot, doldrums especially, more so than the Southern Ocean high-speed sailing. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong.
Okay, well, I was just seeing a couple of the images there of the navigation station on board the boat. I mean, this is basically what the navigator has to stare at day in, day out, hour after hour. And even there, just a little bit of a shot of the computer system. And the reason I just wanted to highlight that is Soon Johnson asks, can computer power make the difference in predicting the weather correctly so that you can gain a competitive advantage? And this was, Conrad Coleman was talking over the last few legs about Vestas 11th Hour Racing having some access to some supercomputers. That was on shore and working with their main sponsor, Vestas Wind. But does computer power on the boat, can you get a better laptop and sort of ramp it up?
Physically on the boat, the laptops are provided by Volvo, so everything's the same. They're very high-spec laptops. So in that respect, everyone's dealing with the same thing. On board, all it would do is help you route a little bit quicker, but it doesn't actually change the outcome. The supercomputers on shore is where the difference is really made.
Okay, and Jodie Spriggins asks, how often does the navigator come up on deck? It seems pretty grim down there. It does seem pretty grim, and I've tried to sit in that chair, and I can tell you your head is banging on the deck unless you slouch.
It really depends on the conditions. When the weather models are working and the navigation software is working really well, the navigator will stay in the station. When the navigation's not going so well, the weather isn't quite looking out, the best thing to do is get on deck and go sailing. See what the clouds are doing, deal with the wind on deck and sail the boat properly. Okay,
so constantly making that walk up and down. Okay, another quick question here from Shork de Beer. Asks, how about rocking the boat like a laser? Let me advise you, if you are rocking the boat to make yourself go forward in the light airs in your laser, stop doing it. You are going to get a penalty. Just like dinghy sailing, the only thing you're allowed to use in the Volvo Ocean Race to go forward is the wind and the waves. You are not allowed to row, you are not allowed to get out and swim, or as one very imaginative fan of the race said, are you allowed to fly your drone with a line going to the bow to pull you forward? I applaud your imagination, but please do not do it. You will get pinged. So we've had a question here about some of the current and some of the routing, and I'm just trying to find it because I want to make sure I mention the person's name. Franz Lichenauer asks, how do you include the current in your sort of navigation planning mid-sea and near the shore? And we're just looking at an image there of some of the currents on the water. Just talk you through as a navigator.
Well, what we do, Volvo supply through their weather system 3 different current weather models, and when we do the weather routing for the wind, we also apply those current models to the routing that's applied. The main feature about the current that you'll see offshore is that it can change the sea state dramatically, from small short waves to long waves, and even if you get counter eddies like we saw on the East Australian current off the east coast of Australia, and as you can see off the north of Taiwan and coming into Hong Kong, there's some very strong currents. Doesn't affect the fleet greatly as a fleet, but it'll affect the sea state and how the guys sail the boat.
And now you let us into a little bit of a secret just before we came on air, because I did, ask you a little bit about current, and you said that your team had something going on in the background.
Yeah, we are working with a company, Deltaris, who they run weather models and current models for around the world. Up to the start, before start time, we're allowed to put data onto the boat, which all the teams do, and we give, at the last possible opportunity, we give the current models from Deltaris to the boat, and that gets applied, and that's good for about 3 weeks, the accuracy of that.
Okay, a question here about life on board, and if you've been following some of the videos and you've been seeing some of the live calls that we make to the boat, you'll know what this question is about. Raina Warren asks, what exactly are the cracking noises coming from the boat? So just explain what that is.
A lot of the cracking is the sheet loads, first off, and then the other noise you hear, a lot of the slamming, the forward part of the boat slamming in the water, and also the track, anything on the track, on deck moving, anything that's bolted to the deck and the blocks. Those are the noises. Just the carbon fiber, it's an incredibly stiff boat. Once you release that energy, it gets its noise. That's what you hear.
And we're talking about tons of pressure.
Tons and tons on the sheet load, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some big loads going through all the systems on board this boat. Not only when the boats are, in windy conditions, but also in the light. Sometimes it pays, you've got your keel over, you've got a lot of systems wound on as well. So everything on this boat fully taking in the load and fully flexing. Here's a quick question. Nicholas Lubert asks, are the navigators also, do they help in trimming the boat? Because as we've said, they're often inside for more than 8 hours. So how does that work?
They will. The navigators will go up on watch. Certainly Vestas, Sci-Fi, their navigator spends a lot of time on deck. Jules spends a lot of time. One thing about the navigators is because they know the data and they know all the performance data, sometimes they can, like we've seen with Pascal, that was mentioned earlier on in the race, on Dongfeng, some of those guys are some of the fastest drivers in the fleet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was incredible seeing some of that footage about Pascal pushing so hard. Okay, another one here about the sort of teams in general. Matthew Sanders asks, was there any plan for how/where to enter and exit the doldrums on this leg? And a secondary question, how much training occurred on how to attack the cloud systems and make gains through those schools?
Before the race, as part of the development before the race, we sort of do a Volvo road book, and it takes into this. It takes in the doldrums, the Southern Ocean, so we focus for a long period of time on those doldrum areas, where we want to exit them, also the weather patterns from the last 15 years that we've dealt with, trying to get into them, trying to get out of them, how the clouds will affect them. Then the crew get a weather briefing at each stopover and also before the race. And the navigator obviously updates. We've got his road book that he takes with him on the boat to watch for what's going on. And that's how they know how to attack the clouds and what to do when they appear.
Okay, all right, we're running out of time, but you've still got a last few minutes if you want to get some questions into us. But here's a technical one, which I thought was a very good question, actually. Jan Shanatsky, I think 9 out of 10 on that one. Talking about the current, are the routing programs, the routing software, considering the lower performance in the rougher sea state? Are there different polars for different sea states?
Yes, completely. A lot of it is up to the navigator to determine what to use. It's not automatic by any stretch, but definitely the navigators are trimming the polars up and down depending on the sea state and wave condition.
And so when you say up and down, they can put in a parameter that says, let's run the boat through this route as if it was sailing at 80% performance.
Exactly.
Or above.
Yeah, correctly, yeah.
So I guess to a certain extent, the navigators can even take in crew fatigue.
Damage, crew fatigue, anything like that. Because the important thing about the weather routing is you can route, but if you don't hit the exact points on the route when you're supposed to, that changes the whole game.
Yeah, okay. Another question here, mainly about sort of race control, so I might take this one on. Rudiger Bedhun asks, are you in Alicante here in race control in Spain? Are you able to warn a boat if there is a reef, if the boat don't see the reef? And this is kind of in connection to the last edition of the Volvo Ocean Race when Vestas did strike a reef. The answer is yes, to a certain extent. I mean, everything in this room is geared to monitor the race. That includes safety as well, but these are some of the best sailors in the world. They are pushing things pretty close to the limit. We're just there to help them out if they need it. So far, so good. Okay, so Carolyn Fortuna asks, how much can clever maneuvering help turn the tide on plastic compensate for the extra human weight on board?
It's very difficult, like we saw in leg one with Team Axo Noble. It's a big problem. One man down, it's a lot. You're at a disadvantage for sure. Obviously, with the new Navigator on board this leg, they're doing a lot better. It's great to see them up there, but it's tough. With one man down, it's definitely tough.
Yeah, well, these are the live positions right now. So this is where Turn the Tide on Plastic is at the moment. And it's certainly quite an interesting spread. We've been having a lot of conversations before we came on air here about Sun Hun Kai Scallywag, that if you've got the tracker open yourself, you've got the latest update, they're all the way over on the left, but Dongfeng Race Team all the way over on the right. We've almost got sort of 3 groups, and I'm sure that the Hong Kong boat Sun Hun Kai Scallywag will be hoping that that left-hand side somehow comes good for them. Ross, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're still pretty confident about those teams to the east.
I picked it yesterday. I think Dongfeng or certainly Dongfeng and Axo. I think Axo are starting to struggle a little bit, but Dongfeng made a very clever move to the east, and I think we can see already it's starting to pay off.
Okay, all right. Well, that's pretty much all we've got time for in terms of questions and input from Roscoe from Team Axo Nobel. These are the live positions, but of course they are going to change, and we are going to keep you updated. You can subscribe to the Race Experts Twitter feed. They update the tracker when anything interesting happens. And believe me, there is a lot happening that is very interesting right now. Don't forget, we also have our competition. Time is running out, but Musto gear, Vestas 11th hour racing Musto gear. We have gilets, we have tops, we have cap, we have everything to run. We've got large, we've got medium, we've got small, and Charlie Enright, the skipper of Vestas 11th Hour Racing, is going to be on the show. He's not doing the leg at the moment. Family problems caught him on the shore, but he's going to be joining us via Skype tomorrow. But the competition for this Vestas 11th Hour Racing gear finishes at midnight tonight, UTC. So if you want to enter, the question is, when will Vestas 11th Hour Racing hit that 2,000 nautical miles to the finish line? We need the day, we need the time in UTC. Put it in the comments on this video. Cross your fingers and good luck. My thanks to Roscoe Monson for joining us. Great to have your input. I hope we can steal you away from your incredibly important performance analysing desk and setup wherever you are, looking after Team Axo Nobel. Do come back. Thank you very much for joining us today. No quick fix in the morning, but at 1300 UTC, we have another daily show. And of course, Charlie Enright will be there. We'll see you tomorrow.